Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But let's begin with an examination of what British politics, or at least what passes for political journalism in this country, has become in recent years. You may not know, but the Mail and the Telegraph today carry stories alleging that Jeremy Corbyn is set to lift restrictions on immigration. Restrictions which, of course, you'll remember, both newspapers, especially the Mail, have spent years furiously insisting don't exist. How can you lift immigration restrictions if we've got uncontrolled immigration? Anybody? Beulah? Anybody? Seriously, if it's uncontrolled mass immigration that's brought this country to its knees, how can Jeremy Corbyn be planning to lift restrictions? But, hey, details, details. There are restrictions, everybody with a brain knows that, but when we leave the European Union, they'll have to make some sort of provision to ensure that low-skilled workers can still come here. So, back in August of last year, Sir David Metcalfe of the Migration Advisory Committee, a man who can be, in fact, should be realistically described as the government's chief immigration advisor, he said it would be pretty straightforward to run a permit scheme similar to a previous model used for seasonal farm workers. Telegraph printed the story, Daily Mail picked it up. Everybody forgot about it almost immediately because it's so obviously true. Of course they're going to need some sort of scheme in place to make sure that the industries that rely on unskilled migrant labour don't collapse overnight the minute we leave Brexit. What happens when one has to presume that Conservative HQ is getting a little bit spooked by this continuing shift in the polls? They phone up their mates in the media and they say, look, we found this document. It's not actually in the manifesto. It's an internal policy document. It doesn't really mean much, but it contains exactly the same suggestion that the head of the Migration Advisory Committee made last year. And even the bloke at the Mail would go, well, why is that a story? Well, yeah, but you don't tell your readers or your viewers or your listeners that it's exactly the same as what the government's chief migration advisor said we were going to have to do last year. Come on. This is electioneering 101. You don't treat the electorate, don't treat the voters like they've got brains and eyes and ears. Treat them like they are just blind bigots. That's what you do. So the story, the exact same policy suggestion that the government's head immigration advisor suggested we should enact last year, when it's been put through the mangle of the Daily Mail, Paul Dacre's worldview becomes Labour's plan to open doors to Britain even wider. These are the doors that you'll remember he spent the last 10 years telling us couldn't be any wider, because we have open borders and we have uncontrolled mass immigration and anyone can come and go as they please. But apparently it is now possible for Jeremy Corbyn to lift all of the restrictions that we have been told for over a decade never existed at all. Are you still with me at the back? 6 minutes after 10 is the time. So why would you do this? Answer, because if you get the word immigration into the story and Jeremy Corbyn and even wider, everyone will react in the predictable and furious way by going, oh, down with him and his awful open door, actually even opener than it was before door policy, because it can't have been an open door policy, can it, if they're now going to make the door even opener. They haven't even got enough respect for their readers to pretend that that's not what they're doing. So he's going to open doors to Britain even wider. It's like that old joke about a door being ajar, isn't it? A door is either open or it's not. But that's not good enough. If they've spent years telling you that the doors are wide open, what are they going to tell you today? The doors are even opener. The doors are even opener. What do we want? Less open doors that are still open. What? And we swallow it. We swallow it. We continue to swallow it. We continue to swallow this spoon-fed silliness. I don't know why. I'm not going to stop wondering why. I'm not going to stop asking why. So the policy that was suggested last year by Sir David Metcalfe of the Migration Advisory Committee as pretty much inevitable, and drawing parallels with the agricultural scheme that we're already aware of, is, to my inexpert eye, precisely the same as the story that the Mail and the Telegraph have been instructed today to use to make you scared. And it's worked, hasn't it? You're scared. Oh, down with Jeremy Corbyn and his opener door than before policy, even though the door wasn't supposed to be any opener at all. I don't know where it stops. 8 minutes after 10 is the time. You look at what's happened in America and you think it really doesn't stop. You could end up with a kleptocrat, with a gangster running the country, and you'd still have your friends in the right-wing media telling you that everything's fine. What's wrong with the president's son-in-law trying to open up a secret phone line direct to the Kremlin that cuts out all the security services and diplomatic conventions and constitutional observations? Hey, what's not to like? It's absolutely fine. If a man whose business interests apparently rely upon Russian investment is put in a position where he might be able to lift sanctions on Russian investment in America and therefore secure loans and financial support running into the billions of dollars, what's not to like? When Angela Merkel suggests that the post-war Western world order that has delivered over 7 decades of unprecedented European peace is under threat from having an absolute clown in charge of the biggest superpower on the planet. Hey, it's all fine. See what happens when the right-wing media goes far enough down the rabbit hole. So far down the rabbit hole that even reality gets subverted. Pseudo-journalistic websites masquerading as news and people believing it. We don't have that in Britain because we have proper newspapers indulging in similar acrobatics. This is just a matter of fact, not opinion, not propaganda, not political positioning. It's a simple matter of fact that today the most powerful newspaper in the country is trying to spook you into thinking that Jeremy Corbyn is going to, I don't know, send the lefty bandwagon to Europe and fill it up with immigrants before driving it back himself, despite the fact that the same newspaper, the same journalist reported the same policy last year when it was a senior government advisor making precisely the same suggestion in completely and utterly different language, tone and intent. And, you know, sometimes I tell you this stuff and I think, I'm mad. Like, what, I mean, this is so blindingly obvious. How could anybody sit here and tell you otherwise? Surely anybody who calls themselves a journalist has a responsibility to tell consumers truth, to tell readers truth, to tell listeners truth. I came on the radio this morning and told you that this was an outrageous new development on the British political landscape, that this was a policy that they were desperate to keep under wraps because it was so controversial and potentially toxic. It's not even a policy. It's not even in the party manifesto, and it's not even a tiny bit different from what the government received as advice from their top immigration advisor last year. And I mention all of this not to start a conversation about the specifics of the latest attempt to treat you like credulous idiots. Rest assured that for 3 hours every day, there's at least one place in the British media that will treat you as whatever the opposite of credulous idiots is here. I just use it as one example, perhaps, of why everything is so hard to pin down at the moment, because we've even allowed the simple concept of objective truth to be subverted. It is the same story being viewed through 2 completely different lenses. When it's the Labour Party doing it, it's potentially apocalyptic in its awfulness. When it's the Conservative Party doing it, or their key advisors, it's just, you know, oh yeah, interesting, we'll have a look at that. And that's where we are now. If you just don't know where to turn to find out. In fact, you've got to do it yourself. And of course, most people can't be bothered. They don't have the time or the inclination or the energy to find out the truth for themselves. So they'll swallow whatever is on the front pages, whatever is being spouted at them by the usual megaphones. They're bizarre. Anyway, that's by the by. I don't want to talk about that particularly today. I just thought I owed it to you as a professional journalist to tell you the truth about one of the biggest stories doing the rounds politically today. What I want you to talk to me about is a story on the front of the Times. And, you know, I suspect that the story on the front of the Times is the real reason behind the stories on the front of the Mail and the Telegraph. The story on the front of the Times predicts a hung parliament. It's a pretty dodgy poll to my eye. YouGov often stand accused of leaning somewhat to the right. I never like it when opinion pollsters are accused of having political loyalties or political leanings, but that because you know, they just ask people questions. But this particular poll seems to be so sort of well, let's just say it has such a wide margin of error that it could be catastrophic for Theresa May, and equally it could be fair to middling good news. But obviously the headline, shock poll predicts Tory losses. YouGov estimate points to hung parliament with 20 fewer seats for May. Highly unlikely, I would have thought, wouldn't you? But emblematic, perhaps, of this weird week in politics. When did it start wobbling? Actually, that's a good question. It was the social pie, it was the dementia tax, right? Was everything fine up until then? So is that what's shifted things? Is it more personality-led? Is it bizarrely the fact that Jeremy Corbyn, who had another so-called car crash interview yesterday, quite a nice performance on the One Show, actually, and then he apologised, or in fact insisted that his trolly followers who've been meting out abuse to the journalist who interviewed Corbyn yesterday should shut up and back down. He expressed in no uncertain terms his disgust at what they were doing, but of course when it reaches the pages of the Daily Mail it says Corbyn was forced to apologise. He didn't just want to. It couldn't just be that he thinks that's the right thing to do, that he genuinely does object to the kind of vile anti-Semitic trolling that some of his so-called supporters undertake on an almost industrial scale. No. He's not allowed to have conscience or integrity or to act in any honest way. He is forced to do so. He obviously wouldn't want to.
If you don't like what a reporter says or asks of me or anybody else, understand the question they're asking. We will all do our best to answer those questions, but under no circumstances whatsoever should anyone throw personal abuse at anyone else because they're doing the job that they've been employed to do. And I will not tolerate it under any circumstances.
It's quite bizarre. And yet it's not working. The opposite is happening. And as a student of politics, I'd love you to tell me why. Why, as they continue to throw the kitchen sink at Jeremy Corbyn, do his numbers continue to increase and Theresa May's projected numbers continue to fall? I don't know. I could probably come up with a couple of theories, but to be brutally honest with you, I'd rather listen to yours. So, just give me your idea of what is going on. And you don't have to be part of the change yourself on this one. I had a brilliant few hours last week where I insisted you could only ring me if your pendulum was swinging. I've just got a terrible image of Jeremy Corbyn turning up naked for the Brexit negotiations there, which Theresa May told us yesterday we all had to imagine. I don't know if you missed that. Apparently your political position, your voting intentions will clarify and crystallise if you imagine Jeremy Corbyn turning up to negotiate Brexit without any clothes on.
Theresa May wants to drive her hoped-for contrast home. So after a tricky few days, a top-up of her main message, back onto Brexit, to try to get away from accusations of indecision. Her number one target, the Labour leader.
With his position on Brexit, he will find himself alone and naked in the negotiating chamber of the European Union. With the Brexit negotiations due to begin only 11 days after polling day, he is not prepared for those negotiations.
Very odd. But anyway, I've tried it. Nothing's changed for me. So why do you think everything is so fluid? That's just what I want to hear. It could be an easy answer, dementia tax, very much your personal position. For me, that was a real moment of clarity, realisation, revelation, or a broader overview, which is all that the professionals and the pundits and the commentators do. Why? Well, if you'd asked me, and maybe this casts me in a slightly unprofessional light, if you'd asked me a month ago how I thought this election was going to go, I'd have said that massive lead that Theresa May had when she called the snap election would pretty much hold firm for the duration, okay? And I'm usually quite good at predicting this stuff. I predicted Brexit, I predicted Donald Trump's victory. I was told a month ago to put money on a hung parliament, and I laughed. I'll tell you who it was that told me when I've checked that it's not a confidence. But if you'd told me, if you'd asked me a month ago or when she called the election, what's going to happen, I'd say not a lot. Not a lot. To quite the late Paul Daniels. Not a lot. Not a lot is going to happen. Flipping heck. Lots of stuff is happening. So, my favourite question for you at 10 o'clock of a morning, why? 0345 6060 973, or if Y is too simplistic for you, try the more sophisticated version. What the flip is going on? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Probably we'll look back and laugh at all of this confusion, but right now it looks unprecedented in its unpredictability. And I would love to know why you think, or how you think, we've ended up at this place, which, apart from the fellow who told me to pile in on a hung parliament, nobody saw this coming, did they? What's happened? It's 10:17. Why the wobbles? Why the wibbles? Why the absolutely unforeseen confusion? I like this text from Jake in Berkshire, just to kick us off. James, during your monologue, something went wrong with my LBC app and it started playing an advert over the top of you. Your speech had Salt and Pepper's Push It playing in the background. And at first I thought this was intentional. It sounded awesome. You should do this all the time. I'll look into it, Jake. Thanks for getting in touch. Some amazing texts coming in. I'll get onto them in a second. Let's get some voices on first. Lucas is in Eastbourne. Lucas, what's going on?
Well, I think that Theresa May is taking the sort of traditional Conservative vote for granted by going quite far right on the political spectrum. I just don't, it just doesn't seem genuine, especially when, like, you see pictures of David Davis and Theresa May holding stronger together signs. It just doesn't seem right.
It does. Forgive me, mate. I know it's not easy necessarily to come on the radio, but I'm not quite sure what you've just said. It doesn't seem right.
Well, what I mean by that is it doesn't seem sort of genuine. It seems like when it suits.
But that doesn't explain why she's hemorrhaged points, does it? Because if it doesn't seem genuine, she wouldn't have had the points in the first place, and those posters of them campaigning. I don't know that David Davis ever campaigned to remain in the European Union. I think you may have misremembered that one. But when Theresa May did, it was well known. The pictures had already been seen, and she was 20-odd points ahead in the poll. So where do you think those points have gone?
Well, I think it's just a general sort of set of U-turns. So 1 minute she's Remain, then she's pro-Leave. 1 minute she, the dementia tax, for example.
Yeah, that is a good example. I mean, but it works a lot better than the Leave Remain change, because she was already 20-odd points ahead in the poll. So, I mean, I can't criticise you. I said, by all means, ring in and state the bleeding obvious, but we probably need a little bit more than the dementia tax to hang our hats on. Maybe we don't. Maybe that is emblematic of a broader truth. 10:22 is the time. Zoe's in Louth in Lincolnshire. Zoe, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah, I was just going back to the dementia tax. I think that the fact that she brought that in, people were obviously outraged by that. The fact that she made a U-turn on the election.
The polling shows people quite liked the U-turn on the dementia tax. They hated the dementia tax, but they admired her for, you know, admitting it was a mistake and moving away from it quickly. Again, it's only one poll, but
yeah. But I just think that then, coupled with the fact that they've gone onto television together, I mean, not obviously alongside each other, but I do think that regardless of what some of the press is saying, Jeremy Corbyn's come off quite well.
Has he? I mean, he had a bad day. He had a bad day yesterday. I'm slightly, as a journalist, I'm slightly unpersuaded by the tactic of asking politicians questions that you already know the answer to, in the hope that they won't be able to pluck it off the top of their head. But I mean,
think that there's an element of, possibly because he's doing well, there's an element of trying to trip him up a little bit, and I think that he seems to remain. I mean, I know yesterday he had a bad day, but I think generally I think he remains fairly calm.
He had a good night with Paxman, and he was. I don't know if you watched the One Show. Did you watch the One Show?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
He was great on that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was fab, and I'm not in the past being a Jeremy Corbyn fan.
No.
However, I feel that over the last couple of weeks I've been swayed by his public appearances, has come across, and I've felt that Theresa May is not quite as strong and stable as she possibly feels she is.
Yeah. I mean, so they made the decision to fight it very much on a toe-to-toe basis, person versus person, rather than party versus party. Yeah. Which, looking back, seems very odd. And you can understand why you might, if you were Tony Blair or David Cameron, even, you'd think, well, we're going to make it all about me. But for Theresa May's advisors to tell her, I'll tell you what would be a great idea, Prime Minister, let's make it all about you. Actually, yes, looking back now, that seems like a very odd decision, doesn't it? Yeah,
and I think it has become a little bit personal as well, and I don't think generally the public likes the personal attacks, and I don't think that she's come off as well.
The dementia tax was doubly silly, because theoretically the idea of people who've got assets paying more for something than people who haven't got assets is quite left-wing in its in its simplest terms, but they managed even to mess that side of it up as well by singling out that one condition for special treatment.
Yeah, I think so as well. But But only time will tell, won't it?
Yeah, of course it will. And we may look back and laugh at this programme 25 minutes after 10, but you can't ignore the repeated shift, the massive narrowing of these numbers. And I'd like to know why. What do we think is going on? 0345 606 0973. I think in many ways, if you are surprised to find yourself part of this narrowing in numbers, then your personal perspective is particularly interesting. But on a day like today, big picture stuff, which we're all qualified to comment on, is fascinating as well. Don't, for the bazillionth time, text me to inform me that you can't get through to the programme. Just wait until I say goodbye to someone like Zoe, which I'm doing now. Goodbye, someone like Zoe, and grab the phone line that she's vacated, OK? 0345 606 0973. I can see 2 empty now, so stop texting me telling me you can't get through. There's some fascinating text coming in as well. This is from Vida, who's in Fulham. My dad, good morning, James. My dad is extremely right-wing. I slightly worry what that means. About a month ago, we were chatting, and he shocked me by saying that Jeremy Corbyn is a gentle creature. That sentence, for me, is a distillation of the swing from May to Corbyn. Another of your callers has mentioned warmth and how cold May and her team appear to be. That's Vida. I am not a political person. I am trying to learn, though. I am wondering, May was keen to remain, and now she has to take us out. She calls a snap election before we leave. Then she brings in fox hunting and the dementia tax that is going to annoy most people. Quite a few people have asked me this. It's a question that these observations are leading up to. Does she really want the job? As I said, I don't understand politics, but is she possibly giving herself the boot here? I don't know. I really don't. And quite a few texts like that coming in, but we'll get back to the phones. Keep them coming. I'll read out as many as I can. 10:26 is the time. Mark's in Barnet. Mark, what's going on?
Oh, God knows.
Hang on, that's my attitude. That's my line. You're supposed to provide clarity and illumination, Mark.
Oh, well, I apologise in advance. First of all, she called a snap election and then decided to have a 7-week campaign. I mean, that's hardly a snap election. If she really wanted to win, then she could have held the general election on the same day as the council elections. That would have been a logical choice.
I don't think she's allowed to do that. I don't think she's allowed. I think there's a regulatory period of time that you have to follow. I think it's 7 weeks.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
That's right. That's what I'm here for.
My thinking at the time was that a 20-point lead or whatever it was always going to be diluted.
Why?
Because during a campaign, the more people saw Jeremy Corbyn and got to know him, they might just jump on his bandwagon. And so it was all.
I thought, I've got to be honest with you, mate. I thought the regular listeners to the programme will attack me if I don't admit this. I thought it'd go the opposite way.
No, I didn't.
No, I know you didn't. You were right. I was wrong. It happened.
No, I wasn't right. But he was a nadir in terms of opinion.
Yeah, I guess he was.
It could only go one way for him, and it could only. And her approval ratings were so high that she was the only one who had anything to lose. It's also been the most inept run campaign that I can. I'm 55, and I can't remember a more badly run political campaign since I've been voting since 1979. I just can't remember.
Michael Foot in '83.
Well, okay, that's too long ago for me to remember.
Okay.
But, this fox hunting thing, why would you even bring it into the election? And why would you upset your core vote, who are always going to vote Tory if they're in favour of fox hunting anyway?
How the fox hunting thing got out is quite bizarre when you look back. I mean, it speaks to competence, really, more than anything else, doesn't it?
Yeah, competence and arrogance.
You think?
So many people have said it. They've just taken their core vote for granted. They thought, well, people think that Corbyn's a lunatic, so they're never going to vote for him. And so, it doesn't matter where these pensioners have got nowhere to go. So, I mean, look, there are.
Well, the numbers don't suggest that the pensioners have shifted much, actually.
No, okay, but
because they've got nowhere else to go.
I think that when it comes to it, people will stand in that, like they always do. The opinion polls always underestimate the Tory vote because there are things called shy Tories. I remember when I was doing my politics degree way back when.
Oi, politics degree, and you can't comment on the 1983 general election?
No, all right, the longest suicide note in history.
What degree did you get?
I've got a 2-1.
Oh, no, outrageous standards of education in this country. The older generation. I can't believe it.
Anyway. What was I saying?
Don't know.
What I was saying.
You're boasting about your degree. Can't believe you didn't get a Desmond.
Oh yes, shy Tories.
Yes.
My politics lecturer at Manchester University talked about shy Tories. That was back in 1980 when I started that degree, and the same is true now. There's still people out there that will fool the pollsters, and they'll...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there's always a slight pro-Labour bias in opinion polls, and these will probably prove to be no different. It all hinges, oddly, on how much of the young people go out to vote, all the people who don't normally vote but say they're going to this time. Brexit was carried in the opposite direction by people who don't normally engage, people who don't normally get involved, and I don't think general elections will respond to the same sort of pressures and processes for the simple reason that they are more complicated. I mean, the absolute tragedy of Brexit was to put a question in front of, not casting aspersions on anybody else. I was supremely unqualified to vote on that, looking back. I didn't have anything like the information I should have had in order to cast my vote in an informed and intelligent fashion. I'm not even sure that I ever could have done. I'm about 100 times more informed about the European Union now than I was before I cast my vote. And you know, someone I think Simon Sharma, the historian, made the point that none of us were qualified. Or Richard Dawkins, one of those very esteemed academics, none of us qualified to make that vote. But of course, you're not really allowed to say that out loud. 10:31 is the time. Sorry, I'm late for the news. It's all Mark's fault. I was learning from the benefit of his politics degree. This from Abby, first-time texter, regular Daily Mail reader, James. I agreed with you this morning, and this is last-minute Project Fear against Labour. It helped Trump, and it will help Jeremy Corbyn if care is not taken. Rich in Croydon, again, this point which, look, I mean, goodness knows, I'm as big a fan of swimming against the tide of sort of opinion than anybody, but I can't quite get on board this. I usually vote blue, but I actually think Theresa May wants to intentionally lose the election as she doesn't want to be in charge of Brexit. And then she won't have to take the blame when it all goes pear-shaped. Mate, she leads a party that's full of people who are absolutely convinced there is no circumstance whatsoever in which it could go pear-shaped. And Pete in Battersea, are we seeing a shift in public opinion reminiscent of the shift that happened during Zach Goldsmith's mayoral campaign? Theresa May is starting to look rather unpleasant with her personal remarks about Jeremy Corbyn. Most decent people don't like that sort of thing. Keep on shining the light. Cheers, Pete. Oh, I hope you're right. Most decent people don't like that sort of thing. But again, just a glance across the Atlantic for a moment. You had a man elected there who at one point was suggesting that his followers who believe heavily in the right to bear arms might want to solve the Hillary Clinton problem. I forget the precise words he employed, but the meaning was clear. So what do you think is happening? A couple of phone lines free. Grab one while you can. 0345 606 0973. Why is everything so fluid? That's the question that I'm answering. Why has what looked, when she called it, to be a romp home turned into a surprisingly, and for me at least, an utterly unpredictable exercise in fluidity and change? I just want to know what you think. 0345 606 0973. You have to presume from their point of view that they called it at the peak. They called it when they thought things can't get much better than this. So they must have probably factored in a degree of deflation of the bubble, or whatever you want to call it, but not categorically, not to the degree that sees polling released today that suggests that the Parliament could be hung come June the 8th. 10:37 is the time. Becky is in Burton-on-Trent. Becky, what would you like to say?
Hiya. I spoke to you before.
That's allowed.
How I look at it is, like before, I do believe Jeremy Corbyn has done a fantastic campaign.
Really?
I can't take that away from him. He's brilliant at talking to people.
Well, he wasn't very brilliant yesterday.
No, I know, but that's the one-off.
Is it?
I'm talking about talking to the public. If
okay.
That's the truth. If like when he's out, I mean, I'm a voter and I'm going to stick to voting Tory.
Yes.
And it's on the three main issues for me: security, economy, and the Brexit negotiations.
Yes.
But when I'm watching everything, and I've got to say, I'm quite consumed with the election. It's taking up all my time. I see Jeremy as he's out there with the people, and also I don't think it helps Conservatives in the way in the press how they call him down a lot. I remember with Donald Trump, and I was one that said. I said about Donald Trump, I said, he's going to win this election. He was going to win it. And I said it from the very beginning. I said, I don't know why people are laughing at him. if it carries on like this, people change. People don't like other people being insulted. And I feel
well, except he did nothing but insult his opponent for the entire campaign.
No, that's what I mean. And I don't know what... It's like we
I love how confused you phoned up to tell me, and now you're as confused as I am.
Yeah, well, what I would say, it's like when the election was called, if I'm really honest, when the election was called, somebody who I work with, he turned around and said, well, and he's a Labour supporter, he says, well, they're going to win this by 120 seats, aren't they? And I says, no, they're not. He says, don't you think? I says, no, maybe 40.
Why? So what did you see that they didn't? What did you see that Theresa May's advisers didn't see? Because 40 will be, I think 80 would be about par for the average backbencher. 80 would be what they'd see almost as a foregone conclusion.
No,
40 is a disaster from their point of view. So
yeah, I thought 40 because, if I speak the truth, I watch Jeremy Corbyn, and I see him.
And you like the cut of his jib, but not enough to change your vote. You just think other people perhaps are...
It's not that I don't... if I speak the truth, I don't trust him. And I know other people do. I don't. But I've seen him in his party. He won the leader of the Labour Party. He had every Labour MP near enough voting him out as no confidence. And
yeah, I know all that.
And that's what I'm getting at. That people like him. Young people like him. And when you promise everything... I mean...
I'm going to have to move on. Becky, thank you. I was trying to find the right moment to interrupt, but I suspect there isn't going to be one. You're quite right. Young people like him. Melanie is in Manchester. Melanie, what's going on?
Hi. Well, I'm on UK Polling Report's excellent website, and you must remember with this that this is only one poll.
And it's not even a normal poll in the conventional sense. I've made that point several times, but all of the polls reflect a narrowing of that lead, which is probably accurately described as unexpected.
Well, ICM's showing a 12-point lead today.
Yeah, it was 20 last week.
Yeah, but the thing is...
So a major narrowing of the poll from 20 to 12. I think that's a fairly accurate description, don't you?
It's moving in Labour's favour.
Yes, unexpectedly.
The reason that I see it has been caused by the Manchester bomb. And did Theresa May show leadership? Did she bring the country together?
I don't know.
What did she actually do? Well, there you go. Don't know. What did she actually do? Can you imagine a state with Margaret Thatcher after a bomb like that? She would have been there. She would have been gathering the press around her. She would have been making statements. She would have been leading everything. I don't even remember Theresa May doing
way more fatal terrorist attacks on Margaret Thatcher's watch than there have been on Theresa May's.
Well,
Didn't even begin to move towards peace in Northern Ireland until she left and John Major took over.
But the thing is, she didn't unify the country. She didn't behave as a leader.
Really?
What, Theresa May?
Yeah.
What did she do after the Manchester bomb?
Well, what else could she have done?
Well, she could have turned up. She could have been on the television. She could have been.
She was all over the place, Melanie. There were complaints coming in from the Labour supporters that she was never off the telly, and Jeremy Corbyn couldn't get a word in edgeways, which is as it should be, because Jeremy Corbyn's not the Prime Minister and she is. But most people felt, to use cynical journalese, most people felt she conducted herself quite well in the aftermath.
I'm not convinced.
No,
the
fine.
thing that came out afterwards was that how little the government had actually done. It had brought in the TPIMS legislation, and we found out that it had only been used once.
Do you think...
It seems to me that she's actually just coasting and letting the civil service do all the work. She has no policies other than keeping the rich rich. When it comes to things like terrorism and things like that, she's not speaking out enough. Everybody can see what's going on, and all we're getting is the same old tired responses of, oh, they're not all like that.
You say tired response, that's also factually accurate.
No, it's not.
So they are all like that?
Well, it's a silly response. It's looking at...
I'm really going with the words you uttered.
Through the wrong end of the telescope.
Is it?
Well, you only need 1 in a billion for it to be true.
No, that's the opposite of it being true. If it's 1 in a billion, then they're categorically not all like that, Melanie. Doesn't matter whichever end of the telescope you're looking through.
So it's absolutely meaningless. It's called the Russian roulette argument. But that's another point. She doesn't seem to have any policies. And if you go on to the Tory website...
I've read the manifesto. It's full of policies. It's odd. Where do you sit politically, just out of interest?
on the outside looking in, shall we say.
So how do you vote? How are you going to vote?
My vote is going to be based on the fact that I don't like my local MP.
Okay, well, leave it there, because I've got all sorts of compliance issues that I'm not fully au fait with, so I'll err on the side of caution. Thank you. 10:43 is the time. Ian is in Derby. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Ian.
I'm not really political. I try to be.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a truck driver, so.
So?
You think? No, I'm just saying. If you want to know what's going on in the country, ask a truck driver, I reckon. And normally, I would say I'm quite a conservative bloke.
Yeah.
But since I've been listening to you, I don't know what you've done to me.
Facts, evidence, empathy, mate. Facts, evidence and empathy. The three musketeers of LBC's mid-morning weekday programme.
Well, I've got a theory. So I was all up for keeping the Conservatives in.
Yeah.
But all I'm hearing is the same old stuff. It's more preaching the same. We'll be safe in her hands, but it's the same old stuff, austerity and everything else that we've already had. I think we're fed up with it. And Jeremy comes on with Labour Party and he's promising the world, but I don't know if he can pull it off or not. But
No.
It makes me feel good when he does it.
Really?
So,
He just works. He just pushes your button, so to speak.
It pushes my button. All of a sudden, I mean, it didn't until a couple of weeks ago.
And you can't blame me for this. I've certainly not played any, I've played no role whatsoever in warming you up to Jeremy Corbyn.
You might not have, but he's a genuine guy.
You think?
He seems like a genuine guy. I think so. I think he seems like a genuine guy. I quite like him now.
And that's enough. And the thing I toyed with last week, and obviously you don't want to take this as gospel because I'm not a truck driver, Ian. The thing I toyed with last week was the sense that even though he spent almost all of his adult life in politics, he looks like the anti-politician. He's got a touch of the Bernie Sanders, and it's almost like, look, we've let the proper ones, and this has parallels with Donald Trump, even though they represent entirely different worldviews. We've let the so-called proper politicians run things for generations.
I think you're right.
This guy doesn't seem to be like the rest of them. Maybe we should just give him a chance. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, I mean...
Nuclear annihilation is the short answer.
I mean, the wrong way, definitely, but America have done the same thing and put a bloke from off the street almost in government, in charge.
For someone like the anti-politician, the anti-politics thing, I like that. Ian, thank you. The only reason I sort of gulped when you said you were a truck driver and I said so was because you seemed to be suggesting that was why you weren't engaged in politics, which is probably not what you meant, but it's pretty much the definition of the thing that winds me up the most. People who think they're somehow not allowed to be politically engaged. It's 10:46. We push it real good. John's in Putney. John, talk to me about politics, quick.
Right, James, I think we've got the combination of two seemingly bizarre factors, but I think very critical ones.
Go on.
First of all, we're operating a voting system that was designed for Whigs and Tories in the 18th century. So therefore, we've got these huge random variables thrown up when you start to introduce multi-party systems. So therefore, nobody's really voting necessarily for who they want. There's a combination of tactics, doubt, and a whole host of other factors.
More so than in any of the sort of other elections over the last 250 years.
I think it increases election upon election.
Do you?
Yeah, because we have more parties included. We've got more sort of regional factors being introduced compared to years past. You know, yeah. the Scottish nationalists and various other factors.
Yeah, Scottish nationalists being a big, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go on.
Then throw into this the fact that we have somebody as Prime Minister who basically has always operated in the shadows. We don't really know who she is and what she does.
She was party chairman, John.
Yeah, but
before Home Secretary.
Work in the background.
Yeah.
As Prime Minister, she is at the front. She is in the daylight. And I think that's where she's struggling, because she isn't really used to it.
She doesn't look like she likes it either, does she? She doesn't seem to enjoy it, whereas Corbyn didn't seem to enjoy it at all up until about a month ago.
That's right. And I think she's profoundly uncomfortable in it. So if you add those factors together, then people's perception of her is going to alter as they see who she, or think they see who she really is, if indeed she really is anything.
So again, the major miscalculation isn't really policy-based. It's deciding and very deliberately designing the election to be fought on a personality basis, her versus him.
Yeah, and partly because in practice, most of the policies are the same. You know, the critics will dismiss Labour as tax and spend. The Conservatives will tax you, spend on your behalf, but somehow through the Paul Dacre lens, that isn't pejorative. So therefore, you get these kind of
anomalies,
weird versions of the same thing. Absolutely.
Yes, and you want the best example, two versions of the same thing for anyone who'd missed the top of the show this morning, and anyone who is poised to fall for this nonsense later in the day. Daily Mail's front page today, Labour's secret plan to open doors to Britain even wider. Corbyn's advisor's proposal to let in tens of thousands more migrants is leaked. Go back to August, same journalist, same newspaper, same policy, different headline. Low-skilled EU workers should apply for permits, say government's top advisor, as it's revealed net migration figures are 3 times higher than official targets. Absolutely identical policies. It's reported completely differently. That's what John means by the distorting lens. What about you personally, John? Are you wobbling, swinging, moving?
Well, I mean, I'm doomed. I'm one of these people with strong convictions, principally from a constitutional basis, but strong political convictions, but doomed to vote in say, a strong Conservative seat. So therefore, basically, my vote will never count. So
and that another element, of course, that idea that if you are in a constituency where they weigh the vote for a party that you don't necessarily support is a famous flaw in our electoral system. But the general consensus is that what we've got is, well, then again, you sort of hear the echo of John's voice saying what we've got was brilliant when we had essentially a two-party system in the 18th century that persisted. I suppose the SDP was the biggest threat to it until the SNP came along. He could be onto something there. Helen's in Derby. Helen, what's going on?
Hi, I don't think it's particularly coincidental that his popularity has risen once the deadline for applications for voting had come in, because I think that will have incentivised a lot of the youth to actually make a decision to decide to vote and to decide to vote for Corbyn. Absolutely, I think
it wouldn't change the polls actually, because whether they've registered to vote or not, they'd still have answered the question the same about who do you like the most.
Yeah, but I think it's more the popularity of Corbyn. There's more people, so people that wouldn't have I wouldn't have answered a poll question 3 weeks ago, because I don't think young people do think that far in advance, to be honest.
No, hang on, you would. If I'd said to you 3 weeks ago, do you prefer Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn, what would you have said?
I probably wouldn't have entered the poll. I think it's because people are more,
Come on, Helen.
I think I probably would have said Theresa May in that respect, maybe, because she was the Prime Minister and I didn't have anything to incentivise me to go elsewhere.
Really?
But I think,
so what's shifted you then? What's woken you up, so to speak?
I think the rise in popularity of schemes, policies that are going to appeal to younger voters.
Like what?
I've not voted before, yet I would definitely vote now because of the investment in education, in the free childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, in the getting rid of tuition fees. Those sorts of policies are massive carrots for me, and they weigh more heavily on my mind than the sticks.
And you trust Jeremy Corbyn to deliver them, because there's a difference between a pledge and a policy, isn't there? Or a promise and an enacted policy.
On what basis have I got not to trust him? He comes across as a genuine, and I think that personality thing is really coming through. He comes across as a very genuine person and somebody who wants to do right, and I think that echoed in his policy and his views against nuclear weapons as well. He comes across as a do-gooder, as somebody who's got a moral compass, and I think that's something that really appeals to me more over than Theresa May.
I hear you, and this is from a position of previous ambivalence that may even have been leaning in the other direction, given that she was front and centre. Can I just offer a personal word of thanks to you, Helen?
Yeah.
It's the first time in a very long time I've heard anybody use the phrase "do-gooder" as a compliment.
I think it is.
I do as well, but I live in a world where doing good is a sign that you're an idiot, and doing anything virtuous is a sign that you're a virtue signaller. Words like liberal.
We need more of that in our country.
Well, more people doing good. Yeah, shouldn't really be a controversial observation, should it? 10:57 is the time. Elliot is in Newham. Elliot, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello, Elliot.
First time caller.
You're very welcome.
I wanted to talk about...
Oh, no, mate. First time caller. Your phone line goes south. What did you do? Just lift your phone in the air? There we go. That's better. Keep it like that.
Sorry, I wanted to talk about the fact of things like social media. I'm quite a young guy. I'm 26 myself, and I have a younger brother. Now, I go onto my own Facebook, and obviously Jeremy Corbyn is popular among the younger people, and I see everything on there about Jeremy Corbyn, people sharing other people's statuses, and I worry about my generation getting sucked into what their friends are doing.
You mean an echo chamber? Or...
Exactly.
Okay, why do you worry about that?
Well, because I think people won't develop their own opinions. I think they will look at their friends and people that they trust and just take theirs. I was quite proud of my younger brother this week that he kind of was looking... He's still undecided, I'm still undecided.
Yeah.
But he said now going for Labour, and I said, well, why?
Mate, last warning on the phone. Seriously, if you don't keep it next to your head, then I'm gonna hang up on you.
Sorry.
And
I said, well, why? And he said, well, because, you know, I see people retweeting videos and reposting videos of, and I like what he's talking about. And I said, well, do you trust him? And so he went out and he recorded Question Time, and he's actually now using other forms of media to get his
and that can only be a good thing, whatever the result is. This sense that we have, that Elliot informs us is happening in his family, that younger people are engaged in politics in a way I can't remember seeing, that can be only good. I met the comedian Josie Long yesterday. I did a job with her, and she absolutely made this point quite brilliantly, so brilliantly in fact that I feel guilty trying to pass it off as my own. But whatever happens in the polling, it does seem to have ignited political interest among a generation that we've been told for years were utterly apathetic and lethargic. We've got a lot more to get through today. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm still quite confused. I appreciate a lot of people have spoken to me about feeling their attitude towards Jeremy Corbyn shift and their attitude towards Theresa May shift. But I still find, and most of the polling still has the Conservatives comfortably in charge, comfortably in the lead, but not comfortably enough, I think it's fair to say. I mean, the figure, and everyone will start reverse ferreting on this the minute the poll happens. The figure that I'm told Conservative backbenchers would consider to be par, i.e., kind of pretty much a score draw, as it were, where they want to be, but definitely no better or worse than where they need to be, is about 80, a majority of about 80, which is much bigger than the majority she's currently got. But it's only a few days ago we were talking about three-figure majorities, which could, of course, still happen. That's the thing we have to caveat everything with. And yet this one little bit of polling, complicated polling, strange polling from YouGov now posits the possibility of a hung parliament. Most polling has seen a massive narrowing of the lead, but the lead remains pretty big. Again, more and more people of all political persuasions suggesting that it's all happening on purpose because she doesn't actually want to conduct the Brexit negotiations. Look, I'm never, ever unnecessarily or unintentionally rude to people who contribute to the programme. I'm incredibly rude to people who contribute to the programme, but it's always intentional and it's always necessary. But on this occasion, I honestly think you've lost your marbles. If you seriously think that there's a conspiracy underway at Downing Street to deliberately throw the election so that Jeremy Corbyn has to carry the can when Brexit goes south, you're forgetting the significant swathes of people who don't think Brexit will go south. And most of them are, of course, on that side of British politics. People who, when we point out, for example, the latest story that just tries to put a number on the amount of treaties that we will have to renegotiate, the amount of treaties and deals that we'll have to renegotiate the minute we leave the European Union. Financial Times has counted them. The total is 750. International, so you can see why so many people now are just putting their fingers in their ears and going, la 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 la, we love Brexit, Brexit will be fine. How many, James? 750, mate. 750 international agreements with 168 separate countries after leaving the European Union. These are agreements that are currently enforceable in the UK, have been signed by the EU during the 46 years that Britain was a member. Some of them are a bit obsolete. For example, actually, I can't think of any obsolete ones, but I'm sure there's loads. Some of them are huge. Aircraft landing rights. We have to renegotiate aircraft landing rights when we're not an EU member. So hard Brexit with no deal would mean that British-based airlines are not allowed to land in EU country airports without a deal. obviously one imagines that deal would be done. Trade deals, everything will need to be renegotiated after March 2019. 295 bilateral deals over trade, 202 agreements on regulatory cooperation, 65 transport deals and 49 customs agreements. There's also 44 separate agreements with the United States, including an open skies agreement that governs flying rights between the continent and the US, which we'll have to renegotiate again. Put your fingers in your ears, put your fingers in your ears, put your fingers in your ears and close your eyes. Because otherwise, you're going to have to come up with answers to how these questions can possibly be solved. So maybe I've just talked myself around. Maybe it is all a deliberate plan to make sure Jeremy Corbyn's carrying the can when these treaties and negotiations suddenly disappear in the blink of an eye. Other than that, what do you think is happening? Why has an election that was supposed to be the most boring in history, seeing Jeremy Corbyn consolidate his position as an utterly absurd candidate, and Theresa May power to strong and stable government, why is it at this point in time gone so fast so far in the opposite direction? I've got a couple of phone lines, actually. Sorry, 0345 606 0973. Lewis is in Shirebrook. Lewis, what is going on?
I think people have kind of forgotten about what happened in the Labour leadership election when you know, kind of these all the Labour guys went, oh well, let's give JC a shot and let's see what happens, 200 to 1, and all of a sudden, just by his consistent message of things can be different and we can actually have a country that, you know, is fit for everyone, all of a sudden that simple message got him elected to obviously the leader of the Labour Party. I don't think it's...
But it never cut through anywhere outside the membership, and some would argue it never cut through anywhere outside the very recently arrived membership.
True, but the rise of social media that's being used in the actual election campaign has been staggering. I mean, I'm seeing...
So the Tories are using it more. The Tories are spending on targeted Facebook ads and I mean, I think when people say, and I'll give you plenty of opportunities to come back at me, Lewis, because I appreciate I've just talked over you, but when people... are you in your 20s?
No.
You're older than that? Oh, okay. Well, then you take this as a compliment. When young people tell me that social media is making a massive difference, I think they just mean that their mates are tweeting about politics and they don't usually tweet about politics, don't they?
So, I'm not so sure, really.
No, okay.
To be honest, I mean, I'm seeing a hell of a lot of interaction in my age range,
yes.
and much older. And I think... because of what's happened recently with Donald Trump, with the rise of the far right, with Brexit, people are actually thinking, hang on a minute, I've actually got to go out and do something here because it's getting ridiculous.
So things won't be, you can't, it's not like a holding tactic where I don't really get involved in politics, it never makes any difference who's in charge, it doesn't matter who you vote for, my life's never going to change, and then you've suddenly got a properly bonkers fascist in the world, potential fascist, depending on who's whispered in his ear most recently. So if you don't get involved, really bad stuff can happen.
Yeah, exactly that. But also, we keep being told that, you know, so a lot of people are being told, don't believe the press, so they're trying to get information from other sources. But also, we're being told, and we have been told for the last kind of 7 years, austerity, we need to tighten our belts, we need to do blah, 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 sort it all out. Actually, there's only so long that people will stand there and have the toe caps urinated on and be told it's actually raining, because you can actually see out the window, everything's getting better. It's clearly not getting better. You know, sick people, disabled people are dying. People are being forced to work that they can't work. People aren't having their incomes rising at the same time as we're seeing huge wealth being accumulated at the top. It doesn't take a genius. You know, you can't keep being told everything's all right, because we can look outside the window and go, it's clearly not all right.
But that doesn't explain the events of the last 10 days. It perhaps explains tectonic shifts that I mean, you won't be surprised to learn I recognise what you describe. But it doesn't really explain shifts or pendulum swings over the last week and a half, does it? Or does it?
Well, I think now that it's kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty, I think that this kind of stage managed campaign has just blown up in their faces, because, you know, you've got Jeremy that walks around and talks to anyone, and he's actually...
You've always liked him. You've always liked him, though. This isn't a recent revelation that you've had, that you like the cut of Jeremy Corbyn's jib.
No, that's correct. I mean, I believe fundamentally in those type of policies. I believe in more redistributive economy. You know, basic social income, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I'm a big advocate of that because, for the simple reason, it makes economic sense with the rise of automation. But
you're good. Do you want to do my holiday cover?
But I just think that, I mean, for a start, you've got the obviously asset stripping. That's been a massive thing. What do we like in this country? We like animals. We don't like to think of kids going hungry. I mean, it doesn't take a genius. If you're going to say, let's kill foxes, that's going to be followed by tops on horseback. I mean, come on, how's that going to play?
So then it's not... I like, you've covered a lot of ground and you've shifted sort of perceptibly from the sort of pro-Corbyn position to the... Actually, the Tories have dropped some fairly epic clangers, taking food away from children and revivifying the freedom to kill foxes in an unnecessarily brutal fashion.
You know, but if you're going to do those things, whilst at the same time there's a message of hope, there's a message of change. I mean, let's be honest. The reason that Donald Trump got elected was because there was a message of change, terrifying change, incredibly dangerous change, but that change nonetheless from something that hadn't previously been working.
Yeah, for most people, and I mean, you know, it hadn't previously been working for significant swathes of the population who, I think, somewhat patronisingly, are often described on both sides of the Atlantic as having been left behind. There's a curious amalgam. I'm in a good mood today, so there's not a key. Sometimes when I'm in a bolshy mood, I want one answer. Give me the answer. Give me the key that unlocks this conundrum wrapped up in an enigma, masquerading as a mystery. Well, give me what I need to understand. Well, there is not going to be any one key to this, is there? One key, great restaurant. There's not going to be any sort of magic explanation. And Lewis covered a lot of ground there, and almost all of it seems persuasive to me. The problem in terms of trying to get different voices on, the problem I've got is I'm asking why you think things have narrowed. So if you are, what I'd like to hear is that you are still absolutely going to vote Conservative. But you also have a view on why things have gone in this direction. Perhaps you even welcome it. Perhaps you saw it coming. Perhaps you've got an analysis that we haven't contemplated yet. I'd like to urge you to get in touch with the programme as well, because I don't want to keep circling the same territory. So a lot of you have texted. I'll read some of those in a moment. But the idea that as a true blue, or however you choose to describe yourself, as a Conservative who probably thought that things would be looking very different from how they are now. What's your explanation for why they're not? Elizabeth is in Worcester Park. Elizabeth, what would you like to say?
James, we need to start thinking with our economic head on. Jeremy Corbyn has dangled a Christmas list of shiny things in front of the young people. They are never going to happen. He says they're costed, but we're all going to have to pay for them, either in our taxes, this land value tax. It's all got to be paid for. In fact, Clegg promised all these things years ago. They never happened, and they still won't. And then the young people will be disappointed. And we have to think economy, Brexit, and security.
Okay, well, you're the second caller to mention those things. So let's look at economy. Let's look at economy. 960 quid, 60 billion quid public sector net debt in 2010. It had risen to 1.5 trillion by 2015.
Maybe, but look at the amount of people that are now in work. You know.
Well, no, I'm looking at the economy like you told me to. The debt has gone up, not quite doubled as some people claim, but it's gone up to 1.5 trillion. From 960 billion.
Money under Jeremy Corbyn.
No, because you're...
Go up even more.
No. We can only talk about facts. You said look at the economy, so I am.
But we've got to look at his costings. He is going...
Well, where can I find the Conservatives' costings?
Amount of money.
Where can I find the Conservatives' costings?
Well, actually, they're not saying they're going to spend a lot of money. They're still talking
Well, where are the costings? Because they weren't on my copy of the manifesto.
Well, I know they're not, because they want to do a green paper. They want to control.
So just to clarify, the party I should trust with the economy haven't published any costings, and the party I shouldn't trust have.
Well, let's go back to 2008.
No, let's not, because it's 2017.
Because that started with the Labour Party.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn wasn't. Well, Jeremy Corbyn was about as far onto the backbenches as it's possible to be. So I've looked at the economy.
Maybe he was.
This is brilliant.
We're going to go back to where we were, and if we don't think
where we were when during a global economic crisis, or during the sort of 12 years of economic growth before that.
The Exchequer, who took his eye off the ball, doesn't bear any responsibility for it at all. Come on.
Well, name me a country that did see it coming.
Well, that doesn't make it right, does it?
No, you said he took his eye off the ball. That means everybody else had their eye on the ball. That's what the figure of speech means. So what country saw it coming?
A loose economic
I'm going to keep asking you the question until you tell me the countries that kept their eye on the ball. Who were they?
Let's get back to Jeremy Corbyn.
Every time I shoot down your argument, you keep saying things like, let's go back to 2008, let's go back to 2010, let's go back to Jeremy Corbyn, let's go back to Gordon Brown. So just to clarify, we look at the economy by judging two manifestos, one of which contains costings and one of which doesn't, and we trust the ones who haven't told us what their costings are. We look at the national debt and we trust the party that has seen that debt rise by almost double in their first 5 years in charge. We look at the economic performance that is predicted for either party, and we trust the one that isn't telling us where the money's going to come from over the one that is telling us.
Strong and stable.
You're a parody now. You're taking the mickey now.
Come on.
Come on.
Not at all.
Right. So just answer yes.
Fine.
Just say yes, Elizabeth. You should trust the party that's not shown you any costings with the economy over the party that's shown you them.
You should trust the strong and stable to negotiate Brexit for us, to keep this country secure. That's what you should trust.
The Brexit that Theresa May is opposed to.
Oh, she's not opposed.
Hang on, I think she is.
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
Was that strong or stable?
That is doing what the people have asked her to do, and good on her for doing that and putting her views to one side and going with the democratic view.
So is it strong or stable to do the opposite of what you think is best for the economy, which you just told me was the one thing we should take into account when considering how to vote?
It's strong to put your views aside and to do...
But her view is that this is really bad for the economy, and you just told me we should trust her with the economy.
No, she will do the best for us that she possibly can.
I love you, Elizabeth. You're fantastic. I have a bunch of daffodils. Strong and stable radio with me every weekday morning from 10. But what do you think explains the shift in the polls? And if you are an untroubled Conservative, I want you to tell me what you think is happening. Because at the moment, apart from saying the polls are rubbish, I don't trust them, it's all wrong, I don't know quite what answer there can be to this question that doesn't leave you sounding a little like Elizabeth, the lovely lady who rang just before the travel news, where there is no answer to the question of what's happening. You just repeat strong and stable and hope that the genie appears. Lewis is in Doncaster. Lewis, what's going on?
I think it's interesting that a lot of people are ringing up and talking about the economic impact of Labour's manifesto, because I think the turning point for me, that a lot of people will change their minds. A lot of credit needs to go to John McDonnell for actually costing things up, because before the idea was with Jeremy Corbyn that it was a wishy-washy utopia that would affect everyone. Oh, we're going to have to borrow money and it's going to affect everyone's taxes. And now you're looking at it and there's revenue streams that have been costed, and you think, hang on a second, I'm going to get better things and it's not going to cost me.
Yeah, and yet, you know, I kind of agree with Ken Clarke personally when he says these things are a little bit pie in the sky, because for example, any economic projection pre-Brexit is probably not going to be worth the paper that it's printed on, is it? Because you just don't know what's going to happen. It's so up in the air. There's a story today about 758 new 750 international agreements that are going to have to be renegotiated from the get-go. I just don't know what the economy is going to do. To say we'll definitely get this and we'll definitely get that. Ken Clarke's argument was that that's a ridiculous restriction to place on a chancellor.
It feels good to be ambitious, though, at this stage, where saying at least with hope that we won't be impacted.
Why with these wobbles, do you think? Because this is where journalistically I wonder if we are, and God knows I'm as guilty of this as anyone, possibly barking up the wrong tree with the gotchas. Because if the numbers have been published in the manifesto, and then to ask a senior Labour politician to tell you what the number is, and then when they can't tell you straight away off the top of their head, oh wow, you know, sound the alarm, stop all the clocks, this is massive news. But the numbers are in the manifesto. Is that why perhaps these massive gotchas haven't really apparently impacted negatively on the polls for Labour? Because the numbers are there if you can be bothered to look for them.
Definitely. No one knows every single nuanced detail of their job. It's one person's job to know that, and I would say that's John McDonnell.
But you know, I mean, the anecdotal explanation for his departure from the GLC under Ken Livingstone's first incarnation as the leader of London was that he was too left-wing for Ken Livingstone.
That's something.
Oh, you're up in Doncaster. You won't remember the glory. And I'm too young. I won't remember the glory days of the GLC. But you think the numbers have allowed Labour to say we're not making it up as we go along, even if
I think it feels more realistic, to a lot of people. A lot of people come to, but the idea of politics for me is and I know this sounds tremendously un-left-wing to say, most people think of themselves first and society second, and that's why the Tory party have seemed to prosper in the past, with the idea that Labour affects most people's taxes.
And they've been clear on that, only the top 5%, and there's some argument over whether earning 70 or 80 grand makes you actually rich. You probably shouldn't use the word rich, but top 5% certainly makes you among the most wealthy. Or you know, the key word being the most, or the EST on the end of the word, the wealthiest, not necessarily wealthy, but the wealthiest. Why then the last 10 days, Lewis, briefly? Because everything you've said, again, like a lot of callers, everything you've said might describe a bigger picture, but the last 10 days have seen, you know, she called the election because she was streets ahead, and now she isn't. What's happened?
I think it's just exposure. I think that a lot more people have been exposed to, as other people have said, the personality thing. People are seeing more and more of Corbyn rather being told about Corbyn by the newspapers. People are seeing him and thinking...
Made me feel guilty when you say that.
Well, people hear from other people's... The reputation of Corbyn before was far, far worse.
Well, why then didn't he do more?
Their own mind.
Has he actually been playing a clever game? Because, you know, I was climbing the walls with frustration that he wouldn't talk to any of us here at LBC. I don't care who he talks to at LBC. He just won't talk to any of us. And I thought that was emblematic of weakness and emblematic... But perhaps you're suggesting, why would he, until there's an actual election campaign underway, why would he come out and start doing glad-handing and PR?
Yeah, I feel like it feels like he's boxed clever.
Maybe
he must know.
Still hasn't been on this show.
He must know. Yeah, that's a shame. I'd like to hear him speak to you.
I would as well, and I really would, especially now more than ever. When you know, some of the more obvious questions have already been asked 100 times. We can try and get down to what's under the bonnet, what makes him tick, whether he wants to be Prime Minister. Do you think he wants to be Prime Minister?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel he's gone from sense to sense, and it feels like he's more confident than ever.
If you watched the One Show last night, you saw a man that looked comfortable in his own skin. But I'm not qualified to say whether he always looks like that, because, as I say, he's not exactly been beating a path to the studio door. Not that any politicians do, actually. Not this door. There's loads in this studio, but I don't know why. Not when I'm on. 10:28 is the time. Lewis, thank you. Dave, West Thurrock. Dave, what's going on?
Hi, James. Right, a couple of things, really. The first thing, really, I'd like to say you put a lot of faith in the media and polls, and most of the experience I've had over the years, and I'm, 62, so most of the experience I've had over the years, the polls are very often wrong, and also the polls are designed, if you put out a load of bad stuff at the moment about Corbyn winning, etc., that's going to drive out Tory votes. That's what they want to do, is drive out Tory votes. So they're using you, they're using the media and everybody else tied up in it to try and get more people out to vote Tory. Can I also say, we'll wait till we get about 1 week away from the election. There will be then who will be the best leader to get us out of what we voted for, which was get us out of Brexit, get us out of the European Communion.
When you say a week,
also, what
Dave,
world leader would we trust out of the three three candidates. Would we go to Corbyn, who'd probably, if we had the Russians coming across the border for any such reasons or anything in a world crisis, would probably just want to negotiate and try and talk to as many people as possible while it all happened? Or would we have Farron who'd start praying? Or would we have Lisa May, who would actually make some decision and have some sort of leadership, because she's the only one with any bits that we really need to talk about?
You mean the pro-Remain campaigner who's leading us out of Brexit, throwing a general election she swore blind she'd never hold?
I wonder if a lot of that as well with the Conservatives. I wonder if that
also, mate, because I'm late for the news. I just need to clarify one thing, Dave. You said we should wait until we're a week away from the election. When do you think it's happening?
I think it'll be as close as we get to the election. The two big messengers.
Yeah, you said wait. You said wait until we're a week away.
Any
Dave.
situation where we might have to do something, and whether or not we're going to get out or we're not going to get out. The other things, I think the Liberals will be wiped out, and I think UKIP will be wiped out as well.
When you said we should wait until we're a week away from the election, Dave, when do you think the election is?
I don't believe what I read in the Daily Mail.
No,
and I don't
clearly
believe
not.
what I read in the Guardian. So they're all putting out different sorts.
Dave, I need to ask you one question, mate. Can you hear me, Dave? Dave? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there, James.
All right, when you said we should wait until we're a week away from the election before we sort of start making any meaningful observations, when do you think the election is, Dave?
Well, I know we're getting close now, James.
It's a week tomorrow, Dave.
9 days, is it?
It's a week tomorrow, Dave.
Oh, all right, a week. So now this is what we're going to see, really.
Oh, mate, I've done my best. It's 11:31. Simon Conway's here with the headlines. Where just the question of why has animated us somewhat this morning. Oddly, the phones are getting busier and busier. I thought it'd go the other way around, so I'll crack on with this. A couple of other things I want to talk about, not least the decision by the Metropolitan Police to allow people to enter the force at detective level, which will infuriate almost every police officer listening to this programme. And normally I'm very much on your side. That it has been very kindly suggested that our spot of the Police Federation exchanges from 2015 has taken on something of a life of its own in the British media. The two speeches, one by Inspector Damien O'Reilly describing how, as a former community police officer, he felt that cuts to that sort of policing were making the collection of local intelligence impossible and potentially endangering national security. He was known as Mr. Gorton. Such was his familiarity with the streets of that Manchester suburb when he was awarded the Community Policeman of the Year by the then Home Secretary Theresa May, who stood up at the same Federation meeting and described such comments as scaremongering and explained how police officers warning that cuts to community policing might have a serious impact on national security at the very highest level. She dismissed that out of hand, and we played the two clips together, and it was quite arresting, actually, if you pardon that absolutely, I swear to God, unintentional pun. Arresting. 11:35 is the time. So I just say all of that because, you know, don't hate on me, coppers, when I tell you that I think it's a brilliant idea that people should be able to join the force at detective level. In fact, if the money was better, I'd do afternoons. Actually, I clock off here at 1 o'clock. I could pop off in the afternoon, solve a few crimes. Be great. I might look into this. Will they do part-times? I could be great. Caroline would be like my Dr. Watson. Be superb. Be patrolling the streets. Yeah, Dr. Watson is a female in the American version with Johnny Lee Miller. You see, we got. This has got legs, this idea. Why shouldn't I be a detective? That might be the question that we ask at 12 o'clock. We need a bit of Thompson Twins, do we, for the theme tune? Rob is in Erith. Rob, what's going on?
Yeah, well, thanks for talking to me, James. First-time caller, so I apologise if I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh, ditto.
I think I give your researcher a couple of points why, but I think the two main reasons I see are Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May. And what we've seen is that Jeremy Corbyn is, I think, now that we see him on television, we see a different presentation of him. Before, it was all, oh, he's grumpy, he's not able to hold the Labour Party together, you know, everybody hates him. But now that we actually see him, you see that he is a strong person. The fact that the whole of the, well, a large part of the Parliamentary Labour Party were against him.
They still are, mate.
In some ways, it actually strengthened him.
Yeah, well, it is another example of how unpredictable things have become, because, I mean, just looking at the most recent numbers, a lot of Labour MPs who were worried about losing their seats could, perhaps will be less worried. But you see that as a sign of his strength. He's just endured all of this ordeal being hurled at him from just about every corner.
What he has been able to do, I think, probably saw that during his leadership elections, when, twice he was up and down the country, he was speaking to huge audiences.
Huge-ish.
Huge-ish. Yes. Yeah. You don't really see this at the moment. You don't see it on the television so much, but he goes up to York, and there's a couple of thousand people turn up to see him in the streets. Theresa May, meanwhile, goes into a little room somewhere, speaks to party activists. I'm not saying that the people in York probably were Labour supporters, but what I think he's managed to do is connect to the people in the north. And I live in London. I'm actually from the northeast, and there's a bit of a disconnect where the northeast feels as if it's been let down by the Labour Party up there.
Yes.
A lot of the vote there turned towards UKIP, mainly not so much for Brexit, but they felt that was an option. They couldn't face voting Tory, but they felt they could vote for the UKIP, who, despite the fact that predominantly they're a Tory party with a lot of anti-immigration message, they felt it was an escape for them. Now, I think the mistake which Theresa May has made is that she assumed that all this vote was going to go to her. And I don't think that is actually going to be the case. I think some of that will come back to the Labour Party.
Well, it looks that way.
I think it does, yes.
And there's also the curious point that he appears to have broken, and this is my own little theory, so I'd welcome it to be shot down, actually, because I sometimes think I give a bit too much weight to my own theories to the exclusion of cleverer ones from callers. But he has, I think, tapped into, so you mentioned the disillusioned voters in the northeast. They were disillusioned with the Labour Party that seemed to speak to people like me, I suppose, whatever metropolitan elites is supposed to mean, people who weren't actually suffering economically but did care about people who were, and it wasn't good enough. The kind of Milibandian era of front-bench Labour politicians didn't seem, it was felt in the north, didn't seem to speak, even though Miliband's constituency is in Doncaster. Corbyn, who, is Islington Labour through and through, does he to be somehow coming across as not one of the production line politicians that people have perhaps had enough of? Well,
yeah, I think, what I know about Jeremy Corbyn is, I'm from the North East. I used to live in Tony Blair's constituency, but I won't go into that because that's all news. This thing which seems to be presented, that Islington is like some sort of, streets paved with gold, and that, you go in Islington, everybody's rich, and everybody's going in and drinking Starbucks and whatever else.
Starbucks as a sign of Croesus-like wealth.
Yeah, but it is, Islington has got a lot of poverty. It's got a lot of people living.
Damn right it has.
And people don't understand that. Saying that people in London don't understand the problems of the North East is complete and utter.
You're so right. What a refreshing voice.
And that is what the agenda has become. It's become now, and this is why I'm going to say the other reason is Theresa May. Her failure has been the fact that she's very uncomfortable speaking to people in large crowds, I feel. She's uncomfortable in the presence of the world leaders. I've seen clips of her at the G7 meetings and EU summits, and she's standing there alone, as if she's frightened to talk to these people and frightened and Jeremy Corbyn's not like that. You see him, he connects to people. And that is, I think, one of the big reasons why the polls are showing increase now.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Well, I don't agree with you on that. I don't, because I'm always thinking of the Michael Foot story when he came out of. He'd just done a public meeting at a working men's club in Worksop or somewhere like that, and they were climbing the walls. They were overflowing out of the corridors, and one of his aides showed him a polling saying that he it was doing worse than Corbyn was a month ago, and he said, it can't be true. There were 1,200 people in that hall tonight, and they said, but there was there's 50 million people in the country.
I think what you're seeing with that, some of the news about foot and what comes out is actually untrue. I think the meeting you're referring to was an anti-war meeting or something, and he went along to spoke at it. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of that goes about, and a lot of big.
And you don't have to be at the rally or the meeting or whatever it's called to be touched by it, do you? You see the voices, you see the faces, you see the placards, you see the banners, and you think, hang on a minute, if this was the other way around, I suspect the coverage would be rather different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's another couple of things which, while I'm on here, I have to say this, otherwise my wife will be very upset with me I didn't mention this, but there's a couple of other things which I think have come across, and one thing is the fact that she's, for some reason, I don't know why it came up, but she said she was going to have a vote on fox hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, that, to my mind, is gone. You know, it's gone. We voted against fox hunting. MPs voted against fox hunting. It's gone. It's optional.
I can only presume that the corner of the party she was least secure about was the Shires, the kind of the Colonel Blimp type corner. No, that doesn't really wash, does it? Because they're the ones that have started calling her mummy. Did you hear about that?
It's something to do with it. There's a number of MPs in the constituency.
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, it could be that. But the stronger the lead, I mean, she could even have done that without saying that she was going to. Could easily have got back into power and said, "Oh, and by the way, fox hunting's coming back." But she didn't. So again, it speaks to competence. Just in a nutshell, because I've enjoyed talking to you, Rob. These suggestions that come in thick and fast from all corners of the political spectrum, she's deliberately trying to throw it because deep down she knows Brexit is going to be a disaster and she wants Jeremy Corbyn to carry the can. Just deal with that one for me, will you? Because I'm not sure I can.
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult one. I mean, that's the conspiracy theory, which, I mean, what my feeling is also, the other thing is about the ivory trade. She took that out of the manifesto as well, not banning the ivory trade, but going to this thing about deliberately losing. I think what we're also seeing with these polls is the fact that the Conservatives are really frightened they're going to lose. So they promote a poll and make it feel as if, oh no, we've got to get our core vote out because otherwise we're going to be stuck with this Jeremy Corbyn. How awful that's going to be. So I think, yes, take the polls with a pinch of salt.
Of course.
The overriding thing we have seen is that the polls were 20-25%. Now the polls are saying 5 to 8%. I mean, yes.
12 in one of them. So there has been a narrowing, a significant narrowing, but equally, I think piling money on 5 to 1 now, apparently, for a hung parliament would still be a fairly, well, you can tell by the length of the odds. Thank you, Rob. That's a cracking contribution. 11:44, nearly 11:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think the attempt today is to move the debate onto immigration. I guess you could say that would perhaps be a sign of desperation on the part of the Conservatives, or you could just say, you know, business as usual. But don't fall into the trap that some of their friends in the media are setting for you this morning. The front of the Mail: Labour's plan to open doors to Britain even wider. If you're just teetering on the edge of that trap and thinking of perhaps falling in, then please be aware that this is the paper that has told us for years that there aren't any restrictions on immigration into this country at all, and now apparently Jeremy Corbyn is going to lift them. This is the paper that has told us for years that the doors into Britain are so wide open that anyone can come through. Now they're telling you that they're going to be open even wider. And this is the paper that reported exactly the same policy last year in completely different terms and language when the suggestion came from Sir David Metcalfe, the head of the Migration Advisory Committee and therefore the government's top migration advisor. I will never stop trying to stop you falling into these traps, even though, oddly, the people that resent me the most for it are the people most in danger of falling, or the people who are already in the trap, down at the bottom, fallen into the trap, but hate me for pointing it out. That's the cross I bear on your behalf. I'm going to disappoint some people, I'm afraid. I'm going to move on to something else at 12 o'clock, but your phone's still ringing off the hook on this question of why things have shifted in ways that were not predicted. Will you ever have anything nice to say about Jeremy Corbyn, James? If so, could you do it before the end of the show today? Hey, come on. I'm just a vessel. I'm just the medium, not the message. Paul is in Holmfirth. Paul, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello, Paul.
Second time caller. Rather foolishly, you referred to me as being some kind of expert last when I first called, but never mind. We'll let that one pass. I think there's a couple of reasons, to be honest, James. I don't think you can just pin it down on one thing, but I think the fact that the Conservative manifesto, with apart from a couple of own goals, which are very well publicised, doesn't just really say too much, or other than what's been happening over the last 7 years, which have been pretty miserable with austerity for most people. Now, you know, as much as I'm a staunch Remoaner, as some people might call me, I think a lot of the Brexit votes were the people who'd had enough of the establishment and were given, to my mind, the wrong people a kicking. Now, suddenly you've had a...
that's strong.
I think suddenly you've had this manifesto, which is costed, and I don't think the costings are great, but at least they've had a go, Labour, which actually says something a little bit different.
A little bit different? I mean, it's quite radical.
Exactly. I mean, radical. I mean, I've been saying for a couple of years now, and I'm a Liberal Democrat member, but I've said for a couple of years, having getting the train up and down the country, coming down to London once a week, I'd quite happily consider someone who would take some of the utilities back into public ownership. Why we have had over the last 15, 20 years, hundreds of millions of pounds going out to subsidise German and French and Dutch taxpayers through the utilities. Why we can't trust ourselves to run our own.
That used to be a joke. It used to be one of my favourite one-liners about we're not opposed to state ownership of utilities in this country. The Conservative government is not opposed to state ownership of utilities as long as it's a foreign state that's doing the owning. But it's actually it's a policy platform now.
Absolutely. So I think that if you look at some of the messages that came out of that manifesto, it was more of a one that gave a little bit more hope, especially the areas where your last caller was from the northeast, etc. That they're not all the UKippers that were wanted out of the EU because of immigration, and let's be honest, Corbyn was never the most in favour of being in the EU.
Not the most impassioned campaigner, Paul. It's fair to say.
Absolutely not. And on the other side of that was May, who was again the submarine, just peeping above the parapet now and again, saying that she wanted to remain, but not a staunch Remain supporter. But whenever you heard anything, it was to remain.
Yes.
So I think there's that. The fact that every time you see May, it's with small, conservative, well-chosen audiences, not going out there engaging with the people, unlike the other leaders who seem to be trying to engage with the public. Corbyn seems to be much more in the people's in the public eye rather than just sort of. He's up and at them. He's front and centre. My whinges and moans about him not coming on this programme are going to begin to sound a bit silly soon because he's appearing almost everywhere else. So maybe it's personal. Maybe it's not personal. Maybe we're just not beeping on his radar enough. Can I ask you briefly? Go on. Yeah, absolutely. Just one final thing, and to come back on that lady before who was all about the economy.
Elizabeth, bless her. She's not here to defend herself, so be nice.
Yeah, security. 1,300 less police, so we have to put the army on the streets. We're not getting the information.
1,300 less armed police. The overall number's much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's just. I think that message of we need investing in our infrastructure and in emergency services. It will resonate with people in this country. We're not like the Yanks. We don't, where that is all about, it's all for yourself.
Yeah, it's a perception. And Jeremy Corbyn is tapping into that notion that there is such a thing as society. In a sentence, why haven't your Liberal Democrats cut through? Because again, if you'd asked me to make predictions a couple of months ago, I'd have said that they'd be filling their boots during this campaign.
I have been, the flagship about, the flagship policy you've seen is about legalising cannabis. I mean, I have been a little bit disappointed, I must say, with the guys at the centre for the policies that have been put out there.
So it's a failure of leadership.
I think so. Yes. I mean,
fair enough.
The best. I'm all in favour of in 2 years' time. And people say it's undemocratic. Well, it's just we seem to be getting used to having a vote every couple of years now. But you know, when we voted when other people, or where 62% percent of people voted for Brexit, it was a long way in the distance. I'm all for.
A long way in the distance, and almost wholly misrepresented by every single cheerleader for it. You can't find two who agree on what they said at the time.
I think when you get to the edge of the cliff, they say, there you go, that's one more step and that's where we are. Is that what you want now? This is our, having been through those negotiations, you know,
yeah, well, that's incoming. I hear you, mate. I'm going to crack on. Paul, you've retained your top of the class status. I remember your last call. You were explaining why people in your part of the world couldn't vote for Corbyn, weren't you?
Well, I think it was, you were asking for positives about Brexit, and my first line was I was very positive, and nothing good would happen.
No, you got me. Yes, 11:57. It's a different Paul who was explaining. I think it just sort of a little to the north of you in Sheffield. I could be wrong. Dan is in Bicester. Dan, I think it's going to be the last word. Make it good.
Oh, no pressure then,
just for this hour. Just for this hour. I'm here till 1. Anyway, carry on.
It was just to say that my main point is really that the reason that it started to slide away is that Theresa May went into the election hoping to focus on Brexit, and it was going to hammer home the fact that she was the key to Brexit being a success. And Jeremy Corbyn, very cleverly, in my opinion, moved it away to domestic policies, focusing on the age-old Labour policy of being the party of the many, not the few, and Theresa May followed that, and the manifesto was appalling. It really was, and I'm a long-time Conservative campaigner and voter and supporter, and it's one of the worst manifestos I've seen. It was a real shame to read it.
And you speak as someone who would ordinarily be out punting that manifesto.
Massively so, yes.
On the doorstep, you're an activist.
Yeah. 2005, 2010, I dread to think how many people I bothered.
Yeah, well, what would you like to have seen in it, Dan? I've only got a minute. I did warn you, but I should have had a bit. What would you like to have seen in it? What do you think might have kept that lead that she had when she called the election pretty much in place?
I think that she had to appeal to the element of a real Conservative base, which is that we want to give you the opportunity to better yourself by giving you the framework and the basis to do that, not through state handouts. And I think that she wasn't able to provide that through any message that came out in the manifesto. I mean, I'm a 30-year-old parent to a 15-month-old daughter, married with a small home, and there's absolutely no benefit over the next potential 5 years of a Conservative government for me. You know, we try to live our life through our own means.
There's a lot of people from all sorts of political backgrounds who feel that they've kept their side of the bargain, and that perhaps political leaderships haven't kept their side. I say across the political spectrum, across the Atlantic as well. Dan, thank you, mate. And I promise I'll find a bit more room for you next time. I had to squeeze you into the remaining seconds. I don't think that actually undermines my detective skills, though, does it? It's just my timing skills. Still not working for me. I've done it a few times now. I've tried to imagine Jeremy Corbyn turning up naked at Brexit negotiations, and just in the hope that it would crystallise my own voting intentions, as Theresa May suggests it should, and just sort of, no, nothing at all. Am I doing it wrong? How are you doing it? What do you do? Do you close your eyes? Is it a front view or a back view? Maybe I've been looking at the wrong side of him. Just have another go. Let's all do it together. Not if you're driving, that would be risky. Let's all imagine Jeremy Corbyn naked going in to negotiate with Michel Barnier. Okay, ready? Well, maybe if we all do it together at the same time, it'd be like Uri Geller, and it will have a bigger force, a bigger power. Hold on to your spoons. Right, I'm going in. Good grief. Hairier than... No? Anything? No, nothing. No. My voting intentions are still absolutely up in the air. I don't know what's supposed to happen. Am I doing it wrong? Imagine Jeremy Corbyn turning up naked for the Brexit negotiations. What if he said that about her? It'd be hell to pay, wouldn't it? Don't do that, though.